Wine tasting with Pete and Dave again. Now, again, Pete, I hope this goes on for a little longer. But what we're tasting today, we've got about 12 wines today, Pete.
Yes, plenty of different options. What have we started with? Some Deutz?
Starting out, in New Zealand. This is a New Zealand-made Méthode Champenoise. Fruit comes from Marlborough, and it's made traditionally from the Pinot Chardonnay grapes.
Yeah.
Beautiful and fruity. This is absolutely beautiful on the bouquet.
It's interesting. It's got a clean, crisp, like fruit-driven bouquet. There's plenty of nice bready, yeasty sorts of things in there, but it's not what you'd call champagne-like in a sense. It's made from obviously Pinot Noir and Chardonnay grapes, and it's fresh and clean and fruit-driven, but it's not particularly complex, but it does what it does very well. I think it's
And I get all that fruit on the palate, along with a little subtle bread and yeasty sort of characteristics. Moving on, this is Australian Sauvignon Blanc.
Australian.
This is Wolf Blass Sauvignon Blanc 2013. Now, I'm not sure where the fruit is from this, Pete, because when I read the bottle...
That would be from the specialist vineyard called Southeast Australia, I would say.
All right. Pretty wide-reaching, is it?
Yes, very wide-reaching.
Now, this is... Wow, I just can't believe how aromatic this is.
The source of grapes for those sorts of wines, they tend to put them on, I guess, mass production wines, and you'll often see that particularly for the export market. So wines that end up in Europe or America, it's basically saying Southeast Australia. It's the very generic catch-all descriptor for where the grapes come from when you've got them blended from all over the place. And at the end of the day, these wines are made to a formula. They're made to be consistent because they want the punters to know, they want the customers to know that if they walk into a bottle shop and buy that wine, it's going to be very much the same as it was last time they bought it.
Yep.
It's cheap and cheerful.
There's a lot of passion fruit on the nose, but there's also some kiwi fruit and a lot of citrus. This is the Penfolds 2007 South Australian Cab Merlot.
Okay, so this is Canunga Hill, yeah?
Yes, Canunga Hill.
So that's the Canunga Hill brand. Very consistent, well-made wines over a long time, Canunga Hill, and the famous label, of course, that it was the entry-level Penfolds Red for a long time. The first vintage of Canunga Hill was back in 1976, released in the late 70s for the princely sum of about 99 cents a bottle. And it was outstandingly good wine. For many years it was considered the value for money benchmark red. Now, under the Canunga Hill label, they've branched out a lot. The original Canunga Hill was a Shiraz Cabernet blend, but we now have Cabernet, a Cab Merlot, a Shiraz, all sorts of other possibilities.
Beautiful fruit on this.
And that's really got some quite appealing elements in it. For a vintage that wasn't all that highly regarded when it first came out, it just shows you the benefit of a big company and what they're able to do when it comes to making quality wine at an affordable price point.
Lovely cherry fruit on the palate. And I think it'll stand up for a few more years.
Yeah.
Now we've got the 2007 Canunga Hill Shiraz Cabernet.
Okay, so this is the prototype Canunga Hill, the one that they first made. Back in, as I said, 76 was the first one made, and for many, many years, this wine was the benchmark for affordable, everyday drinking red wines in Australia. And I think this one, if anything, looks a little bit more youthful than the previous one.
I get a little bit more of the smoky characteristic, and obviously coming from the oak in this.
Yeah, I think a bit more lifted fruit as well on the nose compared to the Cab Merlot. I think this one's got a little bit more lifted fruit on the nose, and it seems, if anything, slightly more youthful than the Cabernet Merlot.
And that's again 2007, so that indicates that's going to go a little while longer. Absolutely lovely. Now, next on our list, Canunga Hill Straight Cabernet. This is again 2007, so it's got a little bit of age on it.
So that's, I think, a little more fragrant than either of the other two Canunga Hills that we looked at before.
A little lighter of that red berry fruit.
Not quite as pronounced in that respect, but it's quite fragrant, and I think you're getting more lifted fruit character than that, even though it's the same age as the other. So you're starting to talk about a wine that's rising 6 years of age now.
Lovely cherry fruit on that, on the palate.
I get good varietal definition of that in terms of Cabernet. Like, I don't have any trouble picking that as Cabernet. If you got that in a blind tasting and someone said, "Tell me what you think it is," I don't think you'd have too much trouble getting to Cabernet Sauvignon in terms of the varietal character.
Is that a little bit of the tannin that comes through at the end, particularly?
And also on the palate, you get like the palate follows nicely along from the nose, which is obviously what you want, and you're getting some of that leafiness, a little bit of blackcurrant fruit on the palate, which tells you that it's Cabernet. So that probably fights well above its weight in terms of its price point.
Absolutely. Great wine.
Yeah.
Next one I've got here is the Saltram
Momray Brook.
Momray Brook?
Momray Brook. Yeah.
Momray Brook. And this is also a vintage.
So this is a back vintage, one with a little bit of age
Yes,
on it.
2006
Okay.
Barossa Shiraz.
Would have thought as much, actually, given the fact that it's got a cork in it, because these days they've all got screw caps. So a bit of a dinosaur perhaps in that regard, but they also make a Cabernet in this range. So from the Barossa, you'd expect the Shiraz to be perhaps more of a typical Aussie red.
Lovely colour to this.
Yeah.
Beautiful. On the nose.
So you're getting a little bit of earthiness there.
Yeah, definitely. Bit of a barnyard sort of a characteristic, as they would say, with that Shiraz.
Yeah. But I would call that a fairly typical old school style of Aussie red, the traditional Aussie red. Not much fuss or fanfare about it, but some pretty good fruit. Still plenty of sweet oak coming through, but starting to soften a little bit now. Bit of earthiness and quite an honest style of wine, I think. And interestingly enough, that the folks at Saltram, they're all part of the Treasury Wine Estates empire these days, and they see this wine and this label as going places. They see that they think Momray Brook has been undervalued over the years, and they think that it should be priced at a higher price point. So
they've been around for a long time as well.
they have, very much so. Yeah.
Fantastic. Next on our list here is the Wolf Blass Grey Label McLaren Vale Shiraz 2006. Now this one's a straight Shiraz. And as we're going down the list here, I get a little more bigger fruit character coming out of this wine.
Yep. I think possibly a little bit more. Well, not so much more oak, but I think a bigger, sweeter fruit character, and the oak is also quite prominent across the.
This is
nose.
French and American oak.
Generally speaking, again, the Wolf Blass tends to use more American oak, or did use more American oak at this time. There's more French coming through now, but they tend to find that the warmer climate fruit characters in these wines, they're quite happy to have the bigger American oak flavours coming on board, and particularly with McLaren Vale Shiraz, they sort of absorb it pretty well.
Next one on our list here is the Ingleby
McLaren
Vale Cabernet. Yes, this is 2007, so this has got a little bit of age on it as well.
Yep. And interestingly enough, I mean, it's got, again, quite appealing sort of fruit on the nose, a little bit of complexity, a little bit of earthiness from the bottle age, but I don't get the same varietal definition on this one as I do with the Canunga Hill. The Canunga Hill, I thought, had more overt Cabernet nuances, if you like. This one is a little bit Variety X by comparison. It's a good drink, but it doesn't scream Cabernet.
A little more tannin there on the end of the palate, I think.
Yeah.
I get a little more smokiness, a little more of a smoky characteristic coming through afterwards as well.
Yeah. Certainly you do get drying tannin on the palate, though. There's no question about that. You do get quite a bit of drying tannin on the palate, drying the palate out, which would lead you towards the Bordeaux varieties, if you like, the Cabernet or the Merlot.
All right, next one on the list here is another Wolf Blass. This is a Wolf Blass Langhorne Creek Grey Label Cabernet Sauvignon 2006.
Okay, so the same age as the grey label McLaren Vale Shiraz that we looked at just before.
But this should have some of those Langhorne Creek characteristics coming through, and that's, I would think,
Eucalypt.
eucalypt and mint.
But
I can get that on the nose.
yeah, although it's not as overt as I've seen it in other Langhorne Creek reds. Langhorne Creek is the Wolf Blass heartland. That's where the fruit came from for a lot of the early Wolf Blass wines that made his name. The Wolf Blass Black Label, which is generally a blend of Cabernet and Shiraz with a bit of Merlot thrown in, they've always been based on Langhorne Creek fruit, and so Wolf Blass himself has a real soft spot for Langhorne Creek. This is the area where he sourced the grapes for all the wines that made him famous.
Out of all the wines that we've tasted so far today, that just has so much more complexity, and it just seems so well balanced.
Okay, so you think there's more going on there?
Absolutely.
Yep. Is that because you think that there's better integration between the fruit and the oak, or do you think maybe there's just better oak in it?
I think there's better integration. I get more of a mouthful out of this wine.
I would probably say, I mean, I can pick up the hints of eucalypt there, but I'd probably say more mint rather than eucalypt as an obvious character.
Okay.
But certainly it's got a character about it which is typical of Langhorne Creek.
And there's some real grippy tannins there as well. Eh?
There are, yep.
Lovely wine. But now, for something entirely different, let's try a Yalumba Old Bush Vine Grenache 2012.
Okay, so this one is very new, obviously, only, new to the shelves. We had the 2011 only recently, and it was one of the few wine styles that benefited, if you like, or showed up very well as a result of the cooler 2011 vintage.
And this
is now onto the 2000. This is now onto the 2012, obviously because the previous one sold out very quickly. It's very unusual to get something into the shops as quickly as that. The 2012 has a reputation for producing wines from most of the premium warm areas of South Australia with big, bold, ripe fruit characters. So,
wow, lovely. That is absolutely fantastic. It doesn't have that overwhelming sort of a lolly shop characteristics of a Grenache, but
it's fabulously fragrant.
They're there.
It's fantastically fragrant, beautiful, lifted, fragrant fruit. There is an element of that musk, I'd call it, rather than confectionery, which is characteristic of Grenache.
You could fool a lot of people in a blind tasting with this wine.
Yeah, well, I don't know. In a sense, yeah, you could, in a sense that we don't tend to make a lot of straight Grenache in this country.
Yes.
But part of the reason we don't normally is because we haven't worked out how to make it as well as we could do. Over the years, we've tended to let the grapes get too ripe because Grenache, of its own volition, ripens and gets quite high alcohol very easily. And so we're sort of thinking, okay, if we're going to be making this the way we would make a Shiraz or a Cabernet, then we want to get it fully ripe. And so the winemakers let it get really, really ripe. Then they go and chuck a whole lot of oak at it, which again doesn't work for Grenache. These guys on the other hand...
I don't get much oak on this.
No, these guys on the other hand have handled this supremely well. They know what they're doing. Old bush vines, it's got beautiful, wonderful, lifted fragrance on the nose, and on the palate you get this sweet, lush fruit, but everything's in beautiful balance, and there's virtually no oak in it. And that's precisely what you want. If you're going to make a varietal Grenache, that's the way you want to be making it.
Great. Fantastic. Now, to finish this off, Pete, I think a little tribute would be a good idea here. A tribute to Peter Lehmann. Peter Lehmann passed away yesterday. So we've got three wines here, three of Peter Lehmann's wines. We've got the Shiraz Mataro draw card and the Straight Shiraz draw card. And then we've got the Peter Lehmann
Stonewall Shiraz.
Shiraz from Barossa.
We've got the heavy hitter at the end. Well, the first two that we have here, the draw card, they're both from the brilliant 2010 vintage. Both of them, I guess, quintessential Barossa reds, the style that Peter Lehmann made his name on. And yeah, he's a legend of the industry, a fellow who will be regarded in years to come as one of the true legends of Australian wine. And a sad loss to the industry, but he had a full life. In fact, many of his cohorts have said that he probably fitted a couple of lifetimes into his 82 years. And this is the sort of wine that he, I guess, became famous for, but also the sort of wine that he championed. He wanted people to know all about Barossa Shiraz. One of his famous calls was that when God invented Shiraz, he had the Barossa in mind as the place where they were going to make it. The first one, Shiraz Mataro, interesting that we've always called it Mataro in South Australia. In more recent years, we've become all fashionable and we've used the French word Mourvèdre to describe it. It's the same grape, obviously. But now a lot of the old-timers in the Barossa are going back to calling their wine Mataro because they want to have a statement about it saying, we're not trying to make something that's French or Spanish in terms of calling it Monastrell. It's all the same grape variety. But we're going to call it Mataro because we want people to think that it's an Aussie wine. This here is your classic Barossa blend.
Wow.
Shiraz and Mataro
This
together.
is beautiful. Beautiful on the nose and even better on the palate. I've tasted that. There's a subtle sweetness that comes through, which I detect is from that Mataro grape variety, but then the huge Shiraz fruit comes through there. It's just, what a beautiful blend.
Yep. But you're getting, I guess what I think of as a little bit of a wild edge that the Mataro brings to the wine. And if you look at a lot of the wines made from that grape variety in France, for example, they describe dried herbs, they describe all sorts of almost like grasses and fields and things, and those are the characters that quite often come from the Mataro grape. In the Barossa, they get nice and warm and generous flavours, but you've still got that dry edge to it that really adds a bit of complexity to the finished wine.
Beautiful wine.
Absolutely. Yep.
May he rest in peace.
Indeed.
All right, so we've got the straight Shiraz here now. This is the draw card Shiraz.
So here,
2010 again?
We have the draw card Shiraz. So here we're getting a more opulent nose, if you like. Pretty swanky oak on this. Really classy oak. Very well handled. Not dominant at all. And again, I'm led to believe that, as with a lot of the other top-end Lehman Reds these days, that they're moving more towards French oak rather than American oak, so you're not getting that sweet coconutty overlay that once would have characterised this sort of wine. Now we're getting beautiful ripe fruit on the nose, but really classy oak going in with it and complementing each other. And in a vintage such as 2010, you're getting the full package there.
Wow. Wow. Huge on the palate. Black currants. Big, dark berry fruits. Beautiful.
Absolutely. But a wine in the modern idiom in that it has approachable plush tannin, so that whilst you know it's going to keep, you could also drink it now and get quite a lot of satisfaction out of it.
Yep, I wouldn't worry about opening a bottle of that.
Anytime soon.
Yes. Now we have the Stonewall Shiraz. This is 2008. The 2010 of this still isn't out yet, is it?
No, it's not. The 2008 is current release of this, and this is the star of the stable for Peter Lehman. And given the fact that we're opening these wines as a tribute to the man who did more than anybody else to look after the Barossa Valley, it's probably only fitting that we should have his Stonewall Shiraz, because it was all about Barossa Shiraz for Peter Lehman, and this is the flagship wine from the Peter Lehman stable. A very hot vintage, 2008, and a lot of the wineries, especially some of the smaller wineries, struggled in 2008 because it was a question of when you picked the grapes so that they didn't turn into port, but you still got the right characters you want in Barossa Shiraz. But this is beautifully balanced, and obviously Peter Lehman in the fortunate position of being able to cherry pick a little bit. They could pick the best batches, the best fruit, and it goes into this wine.
This is incredible. It's I feel that this has got so much more balance than the draw card. Just putting them side by side, it just seems to be a much bigger wine. There seems to be a little bit more fruit tannin, a little bit more oak tannin, which would indicate this wine's going to go a long, long way.
Yeah, I don't know about more balance in the sense. I mean, I think the other two wines were both well balanced, but this has got great balance, and that's the ultimate expression that you want in a premium wine. If you're looking for something that's going to be called a great wine, a wine that's going to be looking good in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years' time, it's all about balance. You can have the biggest, richest, ripest fruit that you can possibly get, but you need that to be balanced by the acid and the tannin and everything else there. And really, that's what this is all about.
Yeah. It
It's
goes
about
on and on
balance.
and on the palate.
Oh, the intensity is quite bewildering in many ways. You look at that, and that's where you see, even though the 10's ostensibly a better vintage than 8, that's where this wine sets itself apart from everything else because of the sheer intensity of the fruit and at the same time the vibrancy of the fruit as well.
Absolutely fantastic.
And a fitting tribute to the Baron of the Barossa.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Pete, and we'll see you again soon.
You will indeed.